You're watching The Shift Asia. I'm Frida Liu. EUROCHAM Malaysia was established over 30 years ago in 1993. It's a chamber of chambers by several European Union bilateral chambers of commerce. It is the aim of the chamber to be the united voice of the EU business community in Malaysia, as well as to facilitate trade investments between Europe and Malaysia with more than 1,600 companies in its wider network. Is it more? Is it less? I'm here with CEO Karl Godderis to find out more about its sustainability advocacy initiatives. Maybe we can start off, Karl, welcome first, with the EUROCHAM's work around here in Malaysia, and I guess how it has evolved towards sustainability.
Well, thank you, Freda, for having me today. It's a pleasure. So as you introduced, we are a chamber of chambers for European countries in Malaysia. So what that means is we are the prime advocacy platform for all the European companies that are operating in this country. And over the years, that advocacy work was organized along lines of industry. So for the main industries where we operate in, we had advocacy committees. But then, of course, through time, these committees diversified in more topical focus. For example, there's an HR committee, there's an intellectual property rights committee, and since a few years, there's also one focused on sustainability. Organizing events, advocacy work, and so forth. Since early this year, when I stepped into the role, we decided to slightly change a little bit our approach to sustainability, because a sustainability committee as such became too general a term. So now we have split it up in various subgroups. So we have groups more focused on renewable energy, we have groups focused on water, and recently we also launched a group focused on reducing the carbon footprint of cargo transport in Malaysia with focus on optimization of railway transportation.
And of course this in a way connects back to the chambers and the businesses that the Europeans are known for, right? So you mentioned the different areas. So for renewable energy, I understand that you presented a paper to MITI on behalf of various European companies manufacturing in Malaysia on new regulations for solar, CREST-empowered tariffs. Can you elaborate on this and what you guys are planning to do?
Yeah, so this was brought up by various of our members who are particularly active in the manufacturing industry, which is the majority of our members, who have at one hand relatively sizable energy needs, and at the same time coming from head offices where globally they are subject to objectives around achieving a certain level of renewable energy in their process. Some of them have already access to renewable energy by means of rooftop solar, for example, and others are in the process of doing so. Now, recently, the government had announced a few changes in that sense. For example, in terms of solar energy, there's an introduction of a requirement now to have a battery on site. There's also the announcement of an additional standby charge for companies with solar panels on their roof or in the surrounding areas of their factory to pay that standby charge. And so those regulations were not 100% well accepted by our members for economic and practical reasons. So we tabled that with the government. The other big topic in that conversation was around the announced increase of the power tariff rates for industrial players by about 14%. There we also engaged in a conversation with the government for a variety of reasons. First of all, we feel industry is already paying a fair bit of the power cost for the country. For example, Malaysia is one of the few countries globally where the rates charged to industry are higher than to the residences. Most countries, it's the other way around. And particularly Malaysia, compared with the surrounding countries in ASEAN, the difference is quite substantial. It's in the order of 60%.
All right, and I believe discussions are also underway for water, and what's the story there?
Yeah, so for water, and that comes both from some of our industry members as well, also talking with government agencies, like for example, the Penang Green Council, who also brought that to us. As part of an overall focus on ESG and sustainability, companies want to conserve and recycle water. The interesting challenge is that the water in Malaysia is actually so cheap.
Even I, as a consumer, say it's too low. Right?
And the consequence of that, ironically, is that investments in water recycling and water purification and so on is quite low or poor, because the opportunity cost of the water itself is too low. So
so it's just going to take a while. So there's a lot. I've heard a lot about this, and when you look at your electricity bill and your water bill, right, you see the disparity. I know I just said that it should be a lot higher, reporting from a business perspective, but as a consumer, right? Okay, I get stories of how Malaysian businesses have also benefited from the chamber. I know it works both ways, and and probably, yeah. So where have you seen this partnership working well?
Yeah, well, first of all, I must say that about 30% of our members are Malaysian
Okay.
companies, right? Who either work a lot in Malaysia with European companies because they are their vendor or they have them as a client, or they export to Europe, and therefore they want to be part in this advocacy community. And in that sense, if certain regulations like the one we just mentioned around power hikes, well, that applies both to a local manufacturer as a foreign manufacturer, and then they become member of these advocacy initiatives, and that's how one example of how they get benefits out of membership with us. Yeah.
And it's long work, right? Advocacy takes time as well, right? It will be remiss of me not to ask how the US announcement of tariffs globally impacted the way Europe will be doing business in Southeast Asia and Malaysia. What do you foresee?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think you should look at it from two angles. Is the reaction of European companies and Europe as the EU itself, right? When we talk with European companies operating in Malaysia, there is, of course, partially a wait-and-see attitude, because you asked me this question on Monday, I might give you another answer because of the way the US is presenting its policies.
You mean one person, but anyway.
Yes. But jokes aside, if you talk to companies who have European companies with operations in the US, for example, they say, look, to the extent that our export from Malaysia to the US now gets affected by import duties, they're looking at relocating some of that production capacity into the US. Not without some irony, because some of the companies I know personally build their manufacturing capacity in the US under the Biden administration with the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's actually that political initiative that led to the setup of manufacturing in the US, while now the input duties are aiming to have that effect. But for many European companies, they did that under the Biden administration, not so much here. So that is one possibility. The other is that companies will kind of reevaluate to what extent they can somehow compensate a potential loss of their American market with growth elsewhere. And there we have to talk about the free trade initiatives that are ongoing, and also about the EU, which actually before Trump even was inaugurated, doubled down on its approach to free trade with many parts of the world, including Malaysia. But as you know, there are 4 countries in ASEAN negotiating in parallel with the EU, and that's all to be seen in that context. If the US market becomes too difficult, which is 15% of the world trade, let's then make that other 85% easier by having free trade arrangements between all the participants.
So it might turn out to be good, right, in all
of course.
All right. Now, so EUROCHAM is also assigned to coordinate industry-wide feedback at issues European operators face when attempting to roll out locally the sustainability standards imposed by the HQs overseas, right? So what are some of the concerns here in Malaysia? Are we moving fast enough when you look at what we're trying to do here in Malaysia?
If you talk sustainability in general, of course, the last 10 years, let's say since the free trade discussions collapsed between EU and Malaysia, Malaysia has changed a lot. The world has changed a lot from a sustainability point of view. It is correct that many European companies operating here, if they could, they would take 100% renewable energy. And this is, for example, an area where there are some restraints at the moment, be it practical because the energy is not available, or regulatory-wise because the regulations around installing that capacity are either slow or inhibitive to going all the way, right? So if you look at sustainability from a social and people point of view, which is quite critical for Malaysia because you're unique in ASEAN to the extent that you depend a lot more on foreign labor than, say, in Thailand or Indonesia. There, in talking to our European companies, they actually, when you look at their ESG approach in general, you might think it's all about renewable energy and pollution control and so on. But there's been a very big focus on sustainability in their people side of the business, working with foreign workers, the conditions in which they work. I can mention one European semiconductor company who thought that ESG for them was going to be about renewable energy. And ultimately, a piece of land they had near the factory was used to build an entire village for their 1,500 foreign workers with sports and shopping facilities, taking them out the the darker dormitories they were all staying in,
Right.
and really bringing this into a much better way of living for these people. So that was actually, if you like, a consequence of a European focus on sustainability in
Right.
Malaysia. Yeah.
So is it the S, if you
Yes.
the S in ESG, right? The other thing that you are working on is the Global Gateway Project, right? It's a global initiative by the EU as a response to the One Road, One Belt initiative. 10 billion euros is allocated to Southeast Asia, mainly to support investments in green economy and digital economy initiatives. So, with that amount of money, what are some of the projects potential? Or here in Malaysia?
Yeah, so other than green energy and digitalization, there are two other pillars, which
Yeah.
are connectivity, which can be transport, can be power, and also people and skill development.
Okay.
Malaysia has not been as has not achieved the same scale of global gateway funding as some of the surrounding countries, but what we've
Because?
well, maybe also because Malaysia is a middle-income country in the region, therefore the need for financing with multilateral organizations being involved was perceived to be less critical.
Right.
But what have we worked on? The largest one so far is an initiative in Lumut, near Ipoh, where with European funding, a redesign has been worked on by the Port of Antwerp. It's called the Lumik project, which is basically there to completely revamp the Lumut port into a new industry zone.
Right.
So this is one area. We have initiatives under the Global Gateway umbrella being evaluated in Sarawak in particular, in the hydrogen space. And really recent, actually as recent as this week, we have a big initiative focusing on TVET programs in Malaysia, whereby Europe is looking at bringing European developed and classified TVET programs to a much larger scale in Malaysia, particularly because certain areas like Penang, for example, deal with critical shortages of skilled labor. A lot of European companies operate there, and together with our Malaysian partners, we want to have a more structural approach to having such forms of people development available.
Right. I think of the Germans.
Well, that is one component where we have already very good pilots, but we see potential instead of having 100 or 200 students a year, maybe to have 2,000 a year. And now we're looking at how do we scale that up, and is it just a German-led program, or are there similar European TVET initiatives that we can all bring together in that sense?
It's something that's unique to the needs of Malaysia, right? Now, the Chamber also organizes trips around Malaysia, right?
Yes.
And tell me about the more recent EU Business Day delegations and its objectives. I know you were in Penang this year, in Sarawak last year, and I guess, what do you hope to do with all these trips?
Yeah, so EUROCHAM organizes these initiatives, but the actual impulse and funding comes from the European Union itself. The idea is hereby twofold. First of all, not to have always a pure KL, Klang Valley perspective, but also highlight states in Malaysia where also European companies have a large presence or a large potential. And at the same time, also from the EU side, to have a bit more of a bonding effect among the European business communities, because after all, we have about 3,000 European companies, if you take in all the sole proprietorships on top of the 1,600 members of the chambers. And so indeed, last year we did it for the first time in Sarawak, in Kuching, with a big focus on the green economy and hydrogen. And in February, we had an even much bigger one in Penang, with over 300 participants, where we zoomed in at one hand on the core industries for Europe in Penang, which are medical, tech, and semiconductor, or E&E. But the bigger focus, particularly in the breakout sessions, was around aspects of sustainability and people and skill development, as I just referred to. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Karl, that I've not asked you?
Well, if I have a minute, maybe about the free trade agreement itself, because unlike parts of the world that we referred to earlier, ours is not a zero-sum game approach. Our free trade agreements are seen from a win-win point of view in the way we, in this case, operate with Malaysia. There's an interesting reason to that, is because there's a lot of European companies operating in Malaysia who actually could benefit from freer trade with Europe, because they re-export their products from Malaysia back into the European Union, being subject to the same import duties, say, as Malaysian companies do. And because of that specific background, We have been reaching out as a chamber to our Malaysian counterparts. For example, we work together with FMM quite intensively on seeking synergies in those trade negotiations so that we can go to both negotiating teams,
Right.
European and Malaysian, say, look, our joint platform of industry, this is actually our wish list.
Right.
So this is, I think, something positive to share about this entire process. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing the work that's being
Thank you
done
for
by
having me.
EUROCHAM.
Yeah.
Of course, you have been watching the Shift Asia.